Sweeter Tooth by David M. Smith. Ever since the alien invasion, Jim had cycled into the village every 3 or 4 days to sell a few vegetables, buy necessities, and do a bit of espionage. But when he arrived today, the village was in turmoil. 2 of the alien vehicles were slewed across the road outside Henry's bakery, and guards stood in front, their carapaces shining in the morning sunlight. Jim dumped his bicycle and slipped into the greengrocer's shop. "What's up, Fred?" he asked. The proprietor, shaking with fear, crouched behind the counter. "They came in this morning. I thought they were coming for me." Jim grimaced. He had a lot more to fear from them than the shopkeeper. "What's happening at Henry's?" he asked. "I know nothing," the quaking shopkeeper told him. "Well, at least buy some of my vegetables. I need the cash." Fred reluctantly opened the till and passed over some tokens without even looking at the produce. "Thanks," Jim said, and made for the door. Philip's Cafe was next door, so Jim quickly moved between the two without attracting the attention of the guards. "What's up?" Jim said. Philip calmly poured them both an ersatz coffee. "I don't know a lot," he replied. "They came in this morning, charged in, and are obviously interrogating Henry. They've been there a while." Jim nodded grimly and sipped his coffee. "There have been noises through the wall," Philip added. "Torture?" "Well, heavy interrogation. I wonder what they think he's done." Jim knew perfectly well what his friend had done. They had a system. Henry received instructions from someone outside the village, iced a code on a bun, passed it to Jim, who subsequently phoned it in to an active saboteur cell. They'd been lucky so far. The aliens loved sweet things, and the alien commander had always eaten the evidence. Jim realized he should probably be running for his life right now. But he couldn't leave without knowing Henry's fate. "Bastard alien insects," said Philip, striking the table with the palm of his hand. They sat in silence for a few moments. Then came a noise like a vixen shrieking. They both knew it was Henry. Jim looked at their coffee cup shaking in their hands as though fear had created a minor earthquake at their table. Then they heard other noises. A chair overturned, a dragging noise. They sneaked right under the window's sill, keeping low. Henry appeared being dragged along by the suckers of the guards and was thrown into the back of a vehicle. The commander himself followed, eating one of Henry's famous cakes and holding a further bag full. He climbed in and they drove off at speed. "Sweet tooth indeed. They're like wasps after jam," muttered Jim. "Nothing you can do now," Philip replied. Jim nodded. "See you," he said, opening the shop door. He went straight to the butcher's and bought sausages. If he was going to go on the run, he had better have some supplies. On his way back, he nipped into Henry's dessert shop and borrowed a baguette. It was in chaos with a single smear of blood on the wall. Jim shuddered. Then he rode back home. From his garden, the valley looked just as it always had. You couldn't see the damaged lives from up there. While the sausages cooked, he found an old rucksack and stuffed shirts and underwear into it. Then he put the sausages aside to cool and went outside. He climbed up to the copse, found the right tree, and, hoisting himself into the branches, he searched for a small aperture hidden in a fork. He dropped down holding an old cell phone and mechanical charger, then wound the charger for 5 minutes, found the only number saved in the cell phone memory, and sent a text. "Henry taken. What to do?" He sat quietly, waiting for a response. listening to the birds singing and wondering forlornly if Henry would ever hear them again. After 10 minutes or so, there came a reply. Head south to bridge east of village. Look for white cottage. Bring phone. That was it. He walked back home and packed sausages, baguette, and a flask of water. He felt he had to leave immediately. Henry was brave, but how long could he hold out? Jim made his way downhill towards the river and was about 300 meters down the slope when he heard the sirens. He dropped down and waited. It wouldn't take them long to search his tiny home. Sure enough, after about 30 minutes, they left. He stayed still until dusk, then found a hollow which he lined with grass for the night. That would have to do. He lay there, eating sausage sandwich under the stars. Next morning, he awoke cramped and damp from the dew. There seemed no point in waiting, so he began walking, hoping the movement would dry him off. He skirted the village, which seemed pretty quiet, and pushed on towards the river where he saw the bridge and nearby a white cottage. Was it the right one? He wondered. With no other clues, he carried on downhill. About 50 meters from the cottage boundary, his phone bleeped. He stopped and read the text. Wipe all messages from phone. Restore to factory settings. Walk forward with your hands raised. He did all that but found it difficult to maneuver with his hands in the air. Stumbling, he caught a bush to stop himself falling. I said hands up, called a female voice. He raised his hands again. Sorry, I'm not as agile as I thought. He looked around. Where are you? Just walk, the mystery voice continued, so he did. At the bridge, she showed herself, a petite young woman with a large rifle. She looked as though she knew how to use it. Throw me the phone, she called, then ushered him towards the cottage, eventually getting close enough to patch search him. You don't seem to be carrying anything. Only the remain of my sandwiches. She ignored this and motioned him to enter the building. Inside it was cool and surprisingly homely. A middle-aged man was sitting facing the door. As he rose to shake hands, Jim could see he had a damaged leg. Welcome, he said, and glancing at his leg, added, I too have suffered this torture, so I know what Henry's going through. Why am I here? Jim asked. Aren't I just endangering yourself and the young woman? Ah, yes. Forgive me. I am forgetting the social niceties. This is my daughter Alicia. Put the gun down, dear. The girl obliged. My group suffered badly from the latest betrayal. Not just Henry, but several others. That is why I need you here. Are you game for one last throw? I suppose so, Jim replied. Tell me. I will, but first, we must eat. You will need your wits about you tomorrow. Tomorrow? Jim queried, surprised. We dare not wait. Our days here are numbered. There was a stew in the oven and lots of fresh bread. It isn't Henry's. We make our own. It is too dangerous for us personally to be seen in the village. The man explained that he coordinated the saboteur network. They had one last big job planned to inflict serious damage on the invaders, but they had been betrayed at the last minute. The mission was all set, but it needed at least 2 people, and he could not manage it himself because of his leg. So he needed Jim. Who's the other one? Jim asked. Alicia, he replied. I don't want to use her, but we have no choice. She looked up as her father said this, and Jim could see the steel in her eyes. The job itself was fairly straightforward, but very risky. Over a long period, they had acquired a tanker full of insecticide, taken bit by bit from farm supplies, and this was now hidden in a rail shed at the bottom of the cottage's garden. The idea was to use a donkey, tethered behind the cottage, to pull it as far as the alien camp where most of the guards were barracked. Jim's job, with Alicia's help, would be to get in there and then attach it by flexible pipe to the water supply. The thing is, the man laughed, it tastes sweet. You know what a sweet tooth all these insects have, not just the commander. It will be the sweetest water they have ever tasted. A sweet scheme for the sweeter tooth, Alicia added grimly. Are you game? The man asked. Are you? Jim asked Alicia, who nodded. Then so am I, he said. They intended to start early in the morning so as to arrive at the camp after the day shift had left on patrol and before the night shift returned to base, so they agreed to get an early night. Jim had been allocated a room above the BAM which was warm, dry, and had a decent bed in it. He was tired after his exertion, so was happy to retire as soon as it was dark. He was sleeping soundly when his covers were disturbed. Only half awake, he felt skin next to him. Alicia? He asked. Well, you didn't expect my father, did you? Are you sure? He asked, astonished that a young, attractive woman could be interested in him. Listen, Jim, she said, we're probably going to die tomorrow. I'm damned if I'm going to die a virgin. Next morning when he awoke, she was gone. He hadn't had quite the long rest he had anticipated, but he did feel thoroughly relaxed. As he entered the cottage, he could smell bacon frying. He hadn't smelled good bacon for years. We cure our own, Alicia said with a smile. Jim turned to her father. What about afterwards? He inquired. They are bound to come for me, he said. I am afraid I'll get all the credit for your work. If you manage to get out of the camp alive, go south. It will be safer. Not much safer, but safer. Whatever happens, I'd appreciate it if you could try to help Alicia escape. For my sake. Jim nodded. The actual operation went fairly straightforwardly. Alicia had her rifle, and her father had given them a spray gun loaded with the same insecticide. If you get into trouble, this will be quieter than a rifle, he had said. The tanker was full and very heavy, but the donkey worked hard and they both pushed behind. Jim had real difficulties in screwing the plumbing joint and badly grazed his knuckles. His curse attracted a guard who came around the corner just as Jim managed to connect the flexible pipe and the liquid began to flow. Quick thinking told Jim to slap the donkey's rump to make it run, and the guard momentarily glanced at it. It was enough. Alicia squirted at his antennae with the spray. He stopped confused. Then, as they watched, his face froze. First, his antennae dropped. Then his cheeks slackened until his mouth fell open. Then the effect traveled down his arms, so that he dropped his weapon, and his legs crumpled and he fell to the ground twitching. Very impressive stuff, she said. Let's hope the others have an even sweeter tooth than the commander, Jim said, relief flowing through him. He held up his own water flask. Cheers, he winked at Alicia. But not good health to them, eh? Then they made their way south, as they had promised her father. Jim had no idea what might happen next, but at least so far, it seemed they had been lucky. Alicia looked back regretfully towards her father's cottage as they hastily went down the river, and whatever the future would hold.